broadcasting and streaming live all across America. This is Home Talk USA with Michael King. Join us as we discuss topics pertaining to your home with industry-leading experts. Hosted by Michael King, a licensed general contractor with more than 30 years of experience in home improvements and author of Contracting with the King. This hour is brought to you by HomeTalk.expert. Do you have questions about your next home improvement project or home repairs? Now you can chat with verified home repair and home improvement experts in just minutes. Get the help you need with HomeTalk.expert. That's HomeTalk.expert. We invite you to listen at HomeTalkUSA.com, one of the best resources for home improvement information around today. Your best life begins with your best home, and there's no place like Home Talk. That's HomeTalkUSA.com. And now, HomeTalk.expert proudly presents the #1 home improvement radio program in the country with the man from the Bayou Land. Your host, the Cajun Contractor, Michael King.
Hello, all of America. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. And I am happy to introduce Greg Owens with the Made in America Hour, where we get to look at all the products and the process of manufacturing in the United States of America. And, you know, does it get any better than that, Greg, when you can say Made in America?
Made in America, Made in USA. It's all the same to me.
It is. It is. You know, I love it. And it is amazing to me how many of the inventors that we have on Invent America are manufacturing in America. And it's wonderful because then I can send them to you and get them on your show as well.
Right. A lot of good reasons to make things right here in the United States. So send them along.
I will. And I know that you have got a wonderful guest on, Zach Mottl. And he is going to talk about manufacturing in the United States of America. So, gentlemen, I am going to let you take it away.
All right. Well, everyone, welcome to the Made in America Hour, part of Home Talk USA. And like Rita said, I'm here with Zach Mottl. He's president of Atlas Tools. And if you can believe it, this is a 4-generation company, right, Zach?
That's right. Started by my great-grandfather.
Yeah, you started, you mentioned you started working, as a kid, just milling around on the shop floor. And then that led to a career. And I guess with no further ado, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you became a 4th-generation American-made guy?
Oh, thanks, Greg. It's really nice to be here with you talking about my favorite subject, making things here in America, manufacturing. It's great, important for American security and important for good American jobs and a healthy middle class. So my favorite subject. But I got involved. Obviously, my family was involved. My great-grandfather had worked at Western Electric Company in the early 1900s, and he left and started my company, Atlas, in 1918 on the southwest side of Chicago. And he and 10 other guys that left with him, their intention was to sell back to their old employer, Western Electric. So they made dies and jigs and fixtures for the early telecom industry. This is when, if you can imagine, your viewers or listeners can think about, when we were going from the operator switching, moving the plugs between the calls to an actual mechanical switch on the rotary dial phone. So they were building the equipment that went into all the back offices for that kind of switching equipment. And, over the years, Atlas stayed with the telecom industry. And it's a great example for why we need to make and, have manufacturing here, because we were doing basic, the phones were high tech then, and they still are largely. But out of Western Electric became Lucent Technologies and AT&T, and then Nortel, a Canadian company, and Cisco and Juniper, and all of these networking companies. And also out of them came all of these inventions. There was a little place called Bell Labs, and that was funded by all this phone network manufacturing. And people say, we're going to focus on the high-tech stuff. We're going to focus on the sexy stuff, right? Well, I suppose back then phones were high-tech and sexy. But over the years, they became more routine, and we got rid of that manufacturing. But what we also got rid of was all the inventions that came out of doing that and the funding to make those inventions, right? The funding came out of basic manufacturing. So my company grew up with telecom, and up until the year 2000, we really didn't, we had no salespeople. We didn't need to market. We just grew organically within that industry. And sure, we supported other industries along the way, but telecom was really big for us. And, China, I graduated from college in 2000, started at Atlas. And that was the same year that China earned most favored nation trading status. And what that gave them was some very low bound tariff rates. And that was really the beginning of the stampede of American manufacturing over to China. And so I kind of had a front row seat here in my career. My family did well for 3 generations. And when I came along, I think it wasn't me, it was China. But, we watched our customers head for the door. We had to reinvent ourselves.
Yeah, well, so why was it that they went to China? I'm assuming it was price, correct?
Well, I thought that's what it was, right? We make at Atlas, we're metal fabricators, machinists. We make typically the mechanical commodity. So people know a server rack, or they think of a server room, and there's racks and racks of computers and electronics. Well, those are typically held in metal racks with metal covers and copper bus bars connecting the electrical components on all of them. So we made that. We made the enclosures and things for the switching equipment, the bus bars, that type of stuff. And, when it was leaving, I was, doing everything I can to fight for the business. And it lasted from 2000 until 2008. It was kind of an 8-year degradation, but a large chunk of it left early on. And I kept saying, is it my price? What can I do? Where do I need to be? And the customers would come back and say, Zach, it's just the whole business model. It's not your price. You're actually not that far off from what we're buying these in Asia, these boxes for, really. So that was validation to me that we can compete anywhere. But what they told me was the whole business model has moved, Zach. We're not going to ship your metal boxes, your brackets, your covers to China, put the electronics in them, and then ship them back here. We're just not going to. It's the shipping cost, and we'll talk more about that later, shipping costs and stuff. But so kind of the whole model changed. They started going over for the little pieces, the chips and the boards, and maybe some of the easy things. And then as the technical prowess grew of the Chinese competitors, Huawei, ZTE, right? They were doing contract manufacturing at first for Lucent and other people, but they learned with the little pieces. And then they brought it up, and now they make the whole network, right? There's no, Lucent's gone. There's some, Ericsson and Nokia are still around to some degree, but struggling to compete against Huawei, the dominant player, and ZTE, who just ate everybody's lunch. So they underpriced the high-end equipment, but there was no room in the supply chain for me. It wasn't my pricing.
So Zach, what did you do?
Well, fear is a good motivator, Greg. So I didn't know what to do. And I went to my mentor, my grandmother. She was my mentor at the company, and she owned 50% of the shares. And she encouraged me, get involved, Zach, get out there and meet new people. You're going to have to find new industries and new markets. So I started joining industry associations, and I got on some boards of engineering schools, and I met people and I met new customers. And we started doing some sign work and displays at the time. By this time, it was now 2007, 8, right before 2008, 2006, 7. A lot of banks were merging, so we did a lot of sign work for banks. I was trying to find work that wasn't going to go to China. And so sign work was quick turn and large products that weren't shipping it. But ultimately, that margin was pretty low, and it was pretty competitive there. I needed something better, and we found our way into the defense and aerospace industry. And now I'm pleased to report about 60% of our revenues comes from defense, aerospace, space, rockets, things like that. Very little of it is telecom, but we were able to reinvent ourselves. So my company, we had to realign the staff. Unfortunately, some people couldn't make the transition. Some people did. We had to reinvest millions of dollars in new equipment and facility to do this new type of high-end aerospace work, and again, invest millions in training. So we really made a big investment in the company. We were able to pivot, but I always worry, right? Because now we see the Chinese are flying their first single aisle jet. I'm sure you've seen this, Greg. They compete against, they want to compete against Boeing. And the same thing that happened to my telecom customers is what I worry about for my aerospace customers. The price doesn't matter to the Chinese. If Boeing and Airbus set their price at, $1 million, they'll come in at 900,000. And then, okay, we'll match that price. They'll come in at 800. At some point, they will give them the jet for free as long as they use their software or something, right? The business model in China doesn't require a profit, and all of the Western companies do. So we've got to be awake to that, because we were able to pivot, but I worry, can I do it again? And I think about all the companies and the friends I worked with and the peers, the friendly competitors that couldn't, that are gone, and the thousands of jobs. And we see that across America.
Congratulations on making your pivot. We had to do something fairly similar, and big lesson learned. I mean, talk to the people over at Lucent Technologies, right? They're not even going to answer the phone because they're gone. So You know, we have a saying that it's easy to compete against customers, sometimes not so easy, but it's possible against competitors, excuse me, but it's almost impossible to compete against a government. And that's really what we're doing when we're trying to sell against Chinese companies that are really a government masquerading as a company.
Yes, they were literally competing against a country. And Lucent was the most widely traded stock in America in the late 90s. And it's not like, with the buggy whip that phones and all this stuff went away, right? It didn't go away. It just got underpriced.
Well, we're going to be back with Zach here in just a minute, but we have to go off and pay some bills. So thank you for joining us in this first segment of the Made in America Hour. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Home Talk USA. I'm Greg Owens. I'm here with Zach Mottl. This is the Made in America Hour, and we've been talking a little bit about Atlas Tool and his experience as a fourth generation guy at Atlas Tool. That's you don't hear that a lot these days. But we've been talking a little bit about how Atlas had to reinvent themselves and how Zach sort of got thrown to the wolves on that one with everything that happened in China. And Zach, I bet that sort of woke you up to, wow, there's something wrong here. What is going on with, the whole factories shutting down and people losing their jobs and everything going on with trade? Did it not?
It sure did wake me up, Greg. And, I wish that, around the 2007-8 time period is when I really became awake to these issues. I wish that America had come along with me at that time, because we'd be in a much stronger state right now. But the experience of having to lay off 35 people, many of whom had worked for my family since I was a child, watched me grow up, was awful. And it's something I hope I never have to do again. And it was only done, it was a survival thing, right? I was trying to save the other 40 people that worked here and save the company for the future. So, but that really kind of was a galvanizing moment for me. And around that time, my uncle, he owned a plating shop out in Colorado Springs, which unfortunately is no more either, but they did high-end nickel plating for specialty telescope and high-end camera and video equipment and stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of that industry has gone offshore too, but he had joined this little group called the Coalition for Prosperous America. And they were just getting started, and he kept pulling at my sleeve and saying, Zach, you've got to join this group. They are fighting for American production. They are fighting for our issues and our future. I started learning more about CPA, and I'm honored now to be the chairman of the group, but they're the only group fighting for American production.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've been involved with CPA in one capacity or another for about 10 years now. I mean, I kind of got in maybe not as early as you did, but you're now chairman of CPA and carrying the torch for all of us. And like you say, it's an organization that's made up of manufacturers. It's made up of farmers. It's anything that has to do with trade. And we're going to get in here in a little bit into the different aspects that it's covering and everything that it's about. But one of the interesting things, I don't know exactly what year you got involved, but when I did it, like yourself, I felt like I was one person standing in the middle of a field howling at the moon. And then all of a sudden, because I recognized that something was wrong with our trade. And then all of a sudden you meet other wolves that are standing in the middle of their field howling at the moon. And now it is probably one of the most predominant lobbying groups. And I almost hate to use that word because that tends to mean that they're looking for something to make money out of it. But this is not a lobbying group like you'd have a lobbying group for a company. This is lobbying for a cause, isn't it?
That's exactly right. And so what the group does is it represents exclusively domestic producers. And like you mentioned, we've got farmers, we've got ranchers, we've got manufacturers, and we have labor unions. And all of these groups have kind of come to this nexus, this point where they realized that they were being sold out by bad government policy, mostly trade policy, sometimes tax policy. And they were being sold out by a group that we now call multinationals. And I call them the stateless multinationals. And some people call them the globalists. And these were people who had been sold an economic concept of free trade, and that if we remove barriers to trade and we would enjoy cheaper products, and it would raise all the ships and stuff, and that America would prosper, and it would bring security and peace and friends around the world. But really, they were wrong. They were dead wrong.
Well, yeah, we've had Jim Stuber on the program a couple times, and he did the deep dive into, part of it you could say was intentional. It was just a bunch of greedy people trying to make money. But I went to school for international business and was indoctrinated back in those days to these concepts that just proved to be genuinely wrong.
Correct. In college, I wrote papers supporting these arguments, and then I lived them in the real life. And oh my God. and so CPA was kind of this special group. Like you said, we were all kind of howling alone, and we found each other. And these are companies large and small, some of the largest steel companies in America, aluminum companies. America's entire solar industry is represented, through CPA. The family ranchers and farmers who want to have country of origin labeling on their products so they can differentiate it from beef that comes in from abroad. So it's small businesses, small manufacturers, small farms, small ranches, and some of the biggest companies in America, some of the largest labor unions in America. And we share this problem that if we don't produce things here, if we don't put policies in place to make it beneficial to produce things here, we're all out of a job, every single one of us. And so we came together with that motivator, and have really, like you said, become one of the most influential groups in Washington. I was just in DC a few months ago, and I had a senator's chief of staff come to me, and he said, Zach, I don't know the entire history of your group, but my friends here in this office, whenever something comes up, the first call we make is CPA. And I can tell you, it's not just in this office, it's across the aisle, it's across the Congress, it's in the House too. You guys are the voice on trade and tax and domestic production issues. So I'm honored to have the role as chairman. And really, it's the team behind me doing all the work. I'm just the front man here today.
Well, and one of my favorite parts about the organization, to echo your words, is it is truly, I would almost call it nonpartisan. It's not bipartisan. It's all about policy, not about the politics. People from the Trump transition team sitting next to somebody that worked for the Bernie Sanders organization back in the day, aligning on these issues, casting away all the rhetorical nonsense, and just getting down to how are we going to get the word out that this is a problem and how are we going to fix it. So for our listeners out there, ProsperousAmerica.org is the name of the organization. They publish a lot of great information, a lot of things to read, and perhaps you'd consider joining. But right now, we have to take a quick break. We will be back shortly with Jack Mottl from Atlas Tool and the Coalition for a Prosperous America.
Welcome back to Home Talk USA with Michael King. Do you have questions about your next home improvement project or home repairs? Now you can chat with verified home repair and home improvement experts in just minutes. Get the help you need by visiting HomeTalkUSA.com, one of the best resources for home improvement information around today. Your best life begins with your best home, and there's no place like Home Talk. That's HomeTalkUSA.com. And now, back to Invent America from the #1 home improvement radio program in the country. Home Talk USA with your host, the Cajun contractor Michael King, and his co-host, the Inventor Lady, Rita Crompton.
Welcome back, everybody, to Home Talk USA. This is the Made in America Hour. I'm Greg Owens, and we're here with Zach Mottl, who wears one hat as president of Atlas Tool, and his other hat, which I met him through, is chairman of Coalition for a Prosperous America, which we just talked about. It's a nonpartisan, bipartisan group focused on trade issues that are affecting us as Americans. And it's really neat. I had the privilege for several years to work as co-chair to the Buy American Committee, CPA. We would meet every other month and talk about different issues. We would have members of Congress participate with us and talk about the issues that are really impacting our industry here in the United States. And, you talk about CPA, you think, what about the American Chamber of Commerce? Aren't they out there fighting for the interests of our group? One of these days, I have to have a guest on to talk about his experience with that. Brian, who was a former president of the organization, had his run-in with the American Chamber, which represents commerce, but international commerce, and they really couldn't give a damn about American manufacturing. So anyway, having now bashed the American Chamber of Commerce, which is a topic. What's that?
The American Chamber of China and the National Association of Multinationals, right? Those are my.
Couldn't have said it better myself. But anyway, but we're back with Zach with CPA, which is a genuine organization that our listeners may want to consider joining. If not, go on to prosperousamerica.org and read some of the stuff that they're publishing and the issues that they're addressing, from currency to industrial policy. There's a myriad of things that are being talked about. Zach, I've talked enough here. Why don't you start going over from your perspective some of the important things that CPA is working with members of Congress and the administration on today?
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, and you're right to call out those other groups because they no longer represent American interest. They represent the multinational interest. And CPA is the only trade association in Washington, D.C., the only trade association really in the country that I know of that is exclusively domestic producers. So we're not conflicted with those groups that want to bring product in cheap and sell it to the wealthy American consumer, right? That's really the business model of free trade. That's what happened in the last 30 years. And what it's led to is the hollowing out of the American middle class, a lack of American security on all kinds of things, including, generic drugs. Gosh, if we get into a conflict and we run out of people's heart medicine or insulin, which, could happen pretty quickly, or we look at the shortage list where there's drugs that are, already in short supply, they're all made overseas. This is a real problem for security. And again, not to mention the middle class. So, what CPA has really coalesced around is a group of policies that are called the American system. It's not a new thing, actually. It's what built America. Alexander Hamilton started that concept, and then Congressman Henry Clay is the one who really put that together and called it the American system in the 1800s. And this is what had led to the industrialization of America and made us the industrial engine of the world, the wealthiest, strongest nation in the world. And so other countries saw this, and America, through 2 world wars, things happened, and we were really on top. And other countries saw this and said, boy, how do we get a piece of that action? And started implementing things like tariffs, quotas, and industrial policy. That's basically the American system. It's really not that complicated, but it does take some political will. And there's no country, Greg, I've asked this a lot of times, and so far no one has been able to answer me. Name one country in the history of the world that went from poor to rich using free trade.
It doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist. None of them do. And so we look at trading partners like Germany or Japan or South Korea or China. All of them use the American system. All of them have barriers to protect their industry. And so what the basic concept is, and for America, it can work better than anyone else because we have the biggest marketplace in the world. Despite what anybody's saying about, China surpassing us, A, they haven't, and B, we are the biggest, most wealthy, most robust, deep marketplace in the world. Everybody wants to sell their product in America. Everybody does. And so we can use that market to have demand for domestic corporations, but we need to shelter them. And that's why we have tariffs, or that's why we have quotas or industrial policy. You shelter them and let them sell to the domestic marketplace, let them become efficient, let them grow to scale, and then you can export, you can unleash them on the world, but you're healthy off your own market.
Yeah, a little bit of a history lesson. I mean, mercantilism, which is really what you're talking about, has its roots in Great Britain. And look at what they did. The sun never set on Great Britain, right? And it was largely because of their trade policy that invited in maybe some cheaper raw materials to come in with low duties, but protected their manufacturing industries. And it also protected their intellectual property because they weren't making things in other places where they could be copied and selling against you, perhaps in your own market, which is a huge problem that we have right now. We'll talk a little bit about trade really being a national security issue. But I just wanted to interject there and let you get back to, what are some of the major policy issues that CPA is going after today, and or maybe some of the successes that we've had in the past?
Yeah, well, I think, one major policy issue and one that we've seen actually implemented, and so we can give a little bit of perspective on that, would be the tariffs, right? We saw President Trump implemented the steel and aluminum national security tariffs. Then we saw him put on the China tariffs, as well as a whole host of other tariffs. After President Trump, we saw the Biden administration continued most of those tariffs and added some of their own. Oh, and I forgot washing machines. Trump started with some of those. So, Biden then continued on with solar tariffs and other things. And so we have a little bit of history on this. And there was a lot of hair on fire saying, oh my God, you're going to raise the prices on the consumer, right? You're going to make inflation worse, all that kind of stuff. Well, first of all, inflation had nothing to do with the tariffs that went on. The tariffs went on first, then the pandemic happened, and shortages occurred, and a lot of money was printed. And too much money chasing not enough goods is basically the formula for inflation. So one of the ways we can solve it, besides printing less money, excess money, is by giving more sources of supply. And that's what we're talking about: increasing production in America, making more competitors, making more things here with good jobs that come with them. The other thing with tariffs, the price increases. So washing machines, for example, we saw a little bit of an increase at first. And now the prices of the washing machines are lower than they were when adjusted for inflation than before the tariffs went on. And we saw several manufacturers open new factories and hire thousands and thousands of Americans. There's been no shortage of innovation on washing machines, right? And the price is lower than it was before. We saw the same thing with solar. Biden, helped with some of the solar tariffs and stuff. And we've seen, although he exempted some others, so that was a bit of wanting to have it both ways. But we see that the solar modules are now cheaper than they were before the tariffs. And we've seen billions of dollars of investment and over 3,000 new jobs for Americans. So great examples of how it works.
And one of the things is that we've experienced is, as you mentioned, some consistency from one administration to another, from a Republican administration to a Democratic administration. And that is so important to create an environment where companies are able to make that investment, because those are expensive investments to build a washing machine factory, and something that you're going to recoup over many years. And if you don't have any confidence that those policies are going to remain in effect going forward, then you perhaps don't make that investment. But, look at Whirlpool and some of the examples of companies that have and how they're benefiting now. We're going to have to take a break here and go pay a couple more bills. But when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the national security issues. We'll talk a little bit about currency and manipulation, and how other countries have industrial policies that are long-term thinking and that are trying to compete with us and take advantage of some of our short-sightedness. So Greg Owens here with Zach Mottl. We'll be back shortly with segment 4. Welcome back to Home Talk USA. I'm Greg Owens. This is the Made in America Hour, and I'm back with Zach Mottl, president of Atlas Tool, and he also is chairman of the Coalition for a Prosperous America, an organization that I'm very familiar with, and I'm hoping all of you will check out at prosperousamerica.org. Zach, welcome back. And we were talking about a lot of different topics, but we were talking about some of the specific policies that are just wrong and either need to be, and hopefully some of them are in the process of being fixed as we speak. So, Zach, what do you think are the major things that need to be changed other than tariffs, which we just spoke about, over the course of the next 10 years?
Yeah, so the tariffs were a big one. One little side note to tariffs that I just want to say is quotas, and that there are instances where we want to bring things in, maybe a certain quantity of them, maybe a certain quantity of low cost for a reason or a security reason we don't have it. We can do a quota, and then there's a hard stop. You bring in X amount of tons of steel, and after that, you have to use American steel. X amount of foreign cars, maybe you want electric vehicle, X amount of Chinese electric vehicles, and then we've got to have an American source for that. So that's another side of the coin I think we're going to hear more about in the next administration, be it Trump or Harris. The other big one is currency. And that's really the biggest elephant in the room in terms of what's a headwind for American manufacturers, American exporters, and what's really giving a boost to some mercantilist trading partners. And, this overvalued dollar. And so maybe you've heard a little bit about this, Greg. Is this something that you know about?
Well, yeah, I've been living it for decades. And, for our audience out there who may not be too familiar with how this works, when a country like, let's say, for example, Mexico or China devalue their currency, or they have fiscal policies that devalue their currency, it makes their products in terms of dollars less expensive when they're selling them to us. And it makes our products more expensive when we're trying to export to them or compete against their cheaper products that are coming in. And it's all really just a game that they play with currency valuation. And again, CPA can probably give you more information on that, but how do we fix that?
Well, you're exactly right, Greg. And that problem is supposed to fix itself. When a country runs a persistent trade deficit like the United States has done, our currency should devalue. That's the way. I'm not an economist. I just play one on TV, but that's the macroeconomic formula, right? It's we should devalue. But that linkage has become broken for the United States over the last 20 to 30 years. And why is that happening? Why isn't our currency going down, even though we are becoming really a debtor nation? We're running down our battery. Our battery of wealth is draining, and our currency should adjust to reflect that, but it doesn't. And the reason is because the United States has become the best, and it always will be. It has been for a long time, and it will be in the future, the best and most secure place to park your money. These foreigners are making money, and they should, God bless them, and they like to buy T-bills. They like to buy American real estate. And it's not just individual foreigners. We're talking about sovereign wealth funds of nations, and we're talking about investment vehicles out of Singapore and stuff. They're buying billions of dollars of American assets. And we saw it during the pandemic when things got a little scary, the flight to safety, boom, everything's coming in the United States. And we have no way to control these inflows. So we've really outsourced our monetary policy to everybody else in the world. And that's not a good place for America to be. We want to be in control of our destiny.
Yeah, and in a lot of cases, we're being gamed by it. And for the business people out there who aren't experts on monetary policy, it's sort of like cash flow, right? I mean, it really comes down to, if you're running a company and you've got more cash going out, well, we can cover it through debt and the things that you're talking about. And that helps prop up the value of the US dollar and artificially create this environment where countries can take advantage of us. I mean, if Zimbabwe tried this, I'll just throw that out as an example, they would eventually run out of cash and their currency would crash and go through. I've seen it happen in places like Mexico. In the United States, fortunately, that's not going to happen because we're the place where the world parks their money.
That's right. And this is not linked to the dollar being a reserve currency. We can still be the world's reserve currency, but we cannot be so overvalued compared to these basket of other currencies that have manipulated their way down while we've been driven up by outflows. So we can have our cake and eat it too. And what you mentioned, Japan and stuff, Ronald Reagan did this with the Plaza Accord. He got them all in the room and everybody agreed to adjust their currencies. We can do something like that again. Doesn't mean giving up the reserve status.
I was just floating around on the lake on a pontoon yesterday and talking about the Plaza Accords. Bored everybody to tears probably, but what an interesting concept. We were talking about cars being manufactured in the United States. And this was back in the 80s when Japan was taking over the world, right? And it was all a matter of currency manipulation back then. And they just sat him down in a room in the Plaza Hotel and said, guys, if you want 100% tariffs, we're willing to do that. Otherwise, you got to start playing fair, adjust your currency. And the other thing that we want you to do is we want you to build factories in the United States if you're going to sell into the United States. Guess what? Flash forward to 2024, some of the largest selling auto brands are Toyota, Honda. They're all making them right here in America.
That's right.
We got about a minute left. Zach, how do you want to close out the show? What do you want to tell people to do?
Well, I'd love to have people join. We could use your voices in our choir here, singing about the importance of American production. So please go to prosperousamerica.org. You can click and join as an individual. If you're a company, click as well and let us know. We'll reach out to you to join. But more than being part of the group, what the group is about restoring American security and prosperity. And, the data proves that you can look at our economics research and stuff. There is no better way to a good job for everyone in America. I'm not just talking about the coast or the elites or the cities or the college educated. I'm talking about everybody moving up that economic ladder as production and manufacturing in America. And whether it's high tech like computer chips, or whether it's paper clips, or maybe something about knives and forks and spoons, these are all good jobs. And innovation comes out of the manufacturing process. So if we want to get ahead as a country, we've got to get back to making things.
Okay. Well, Zach, I think we could go on for another 3 hours if we wanted to. So we'll have to have you back on the program. Thank you very much for joining us. Everybody, this is Home Talk USA. I'm Greg Owens. This is the Made in America Hour. We'll talk to you next week. Take care.